Good afternoon. I am Barry Melcher. I am a student at Maranatha Baptist University. I am completing my master's degree in arts and teaching. And today I will be doing a presentation on students with ADHD and how it impacts them in the classroom. So before I begin, I just want to say that I am doing this presentation from my home. And in 2 weeks, I will be living in a brand new location, which means we are deep in the heart of moving right now. This creates some challenges, so to say, but I think we can make this work. So I also want to say that I am attaching a file with all the slides that I will be presenting today. I realize some things may not be able to be seen so clearly from the video, so I would encourage you to follow along with the attached file with the slides for this presentation. Okay? So here we go. So first off, we want to kind of define and give a brief overview of what ADHD is. And I'm just going to go with my definition I have right here, which I received from the National Institute of Mental Health. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a disorder marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention, hyperactivity, and/or impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. And I bolded and highlighted 3 keywords in here: the impulsivity, the inattention, and the hyperactivity. Those 3 terms are pretty much the main function of what ADHD is. So inattention. Inattention is when a person wanders off task, they have difficulty sustaining focus, disorganization, basically just a lack of focus. And it's important to note that this lack of focus is not related to comprehension. It is not that they can't comprehend the material. That's not the issue here. It is not defiance. It is just simply they are unable to focus. So hyperactivity is when a person just is constantly in motion, and specifically in situations where it's not appropriate. It can be represented by excessively fidgeting, tapping, talking, restlessness, interrupting others. There's just a lot. It's a motor that won't stop. So impulsiveness is making real rash, hasty decisions without thinking about the consequences. Impulsive people can be very socially intrusive. They interrupt conversations. They will finish your sentences for you. They just don't think before they act or talk frequently. So these 3 things together are basically the functions of ADHD. So signs of ADHD. And I should again note here that ADHD needs to be diagnosed by a professional, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, somebody that is specifically trained to make this level of diagnosis. And inattention and the hyperactivity and impulsive decision making are the 3 key components of ADHD. So some people with ADHD, they may not necessarily have all 3 of those traits. Some may have just inattention disorder, which would be ADD. Others have hyperactivity and impulsive issues. However, most typically it is found that all 3 symptoms manifest together. So therefore ADHD is the most common form of the disorder. And again, we all wander our minds. We can all be restless and fidgety sometimes. That's perfectly normal. But people with ADHD, these behaviors are more severe, they occur more often, and they interfere with their life, and especially in social skills, in the school, later on in life in jobs. It will create a negative impact, and again, severe and consistent. So inattention, what does inattention look like? People that are inattentive tend to overlook. They miss details. They make very careless mistakes. Problems sustaining attention in activities, lengthy reading processes, homework. People with inattention tend to drift in and out and can move off tasks quickly. People that are inattentive seem like they're not listening when you're speaking to them. Their eyes will drift. They're just not hearing the information. People that are inattentive tend to not follow through on directions. They don't finish chores properly. They don't finish schoolwork properly. They lose focus, and they can get easily sidetracked. Organizational issues is a big problem, such as what to do in sequence, keeping your materials and belongings in order. They'll have a messy desk, a messy workstation, poor time management, issues meeting deadlines, issues turning homework in time. Students that have ADHD tend to avoid or dislike tasks that require sustained mental effort, specifically schoolwork and homework. Lengthy projects that take multiple days and numerous steps to accomplish are not something a student with ADHD would like, and is a form of inattention. Inattentive students will lose things. And this is another common problem. If they don't have a pencil, they don't have the necessary supplies, they forgot their calculator, they forgot their glasses, and the list goes on and on here about things they can get. Being easily distracted is a huge problem students with ADHD has, and because of this easily distractibleness, they tend to quickly lose focus and attention. Some of the symptoms of the hyperactivity and the impulsiveness, fidgeting, squirming, very squirmy. Just again, the motor is constantly running. They leave their seats, they get up in class, they walk around, and again, sometimes these things are okay, but students with ADHD will do these things when it's not necessarily appropriate to be getting out of their desk and moving around and walking. They'll run, they'll dash, they'll climb. Again, inappropriate situations. Younger students, preschool, kindergarten, first grade, during playtime, they may be able to engage in the playtime, but if you ask them to do it quietly, they just are not able to do it. They're very loud. Students with ADHD have a tendency to talk nonstop. They're highly chatty. They blurt out answers before a question has even been completed. They finish other people's sentences. They speak out of turn. And these are very common issues for a student with ADHD. Waiting their turn. They are very impulsive. They want to go. They do not like to wait. So again, these are all signs of ADHD that a student may exhibit. So in the classroom there, issues for ADHD students. These could also be identified as some of the weaknesses that a student with ADHD may have. And most of these, I think, especially as fellow educators, we're pretty clear on what some of the limitations a student with ADHD has. Just talking about the signs that will be exhibited and knowing that they are persistent and constant for a student with ADHD will lead to some very obvious problems that will arise in the classroom. Being able to sit still in the calm situation, not only are they losing focus, but it can be a detriment to their peers as well if the student with ADHD does not have an outlet for this movement here. constantly fidgeting, being unable to concentrate on tasks. If you're not able to concentrate, follow the steps, follow the sequence of events, this will lead to issues trying to properly complete the work. Excessive physical movement. Again, this is all back to the fidgeting. Excessive talking. And again, if an ADHD student is continually talking, it can diminish the ability for their peers in the classroom to demonstrate their strengths or offer their differing opinions on a topic. ADHD students can dominate the conversation. Unable to wait their turn, which again, especially in the younger kids here, being able to share is a big thing, an important skill that you will need to work in a collaborative environment, which is going to be important for the rest of our lives. Acting without thinking. Again, that's the impulsive nature that comes in, that the decision-making process is not thought through all the way, and things that are said and done can result in physical harm or simply be a hurtful action, which may not necessarily be the intended result of the student with ADHD, but again, they tend to do these actions so spontaneously and don't think of the repercussions that can happen, which can have a very negative impact for the student, the teacher, and the class as a whole. Interrupting conversations. Again, it's difficult, especially as a teacher, if you have a student that's blurting, not raising their hands, constantly in motion in the classroom here. So these things distract and detract, not just from the student with ADHD, but the whole class environment. So we've looked at some of the issues that the ADHD student has and some of their weaknesses, but many students with ADHD also have many strengths, and sometimes these strengths are not discussed nearly as much as the weaknesses are focused on. Children with ADHD are typically very intelligent. They are average to above average intelligence, and this intelligence sometimes really gets lost in the shuffle because it could be overshadowed by missing assignments, by poor test scores, and behavioral problems. So finding that child's unique intellectual abilities and using them to encourage their learning is very, very important. ADHD students tend to be highly creative. They're good at thinking outside of the box. They apply knowledge in new and creative ways. They are not afraid to take risks. They will offer their opinion. And giving ADHD students opportunities to problem solve and create in the classroom can more readily engage them in the learning process. Activity level. It should go without saying that ADHD students bring a lot of energy to the classroom. That they are not lacking. They also bring a lot of enthusiasm to ideas and projects that are exciting to them. They can make excellent cheerleaders and root on their classmates to succeed. Once they are engaged, they can sustain that energy for long periods of time. And this activity level, just giving the kids outlets for it by encouraging them to run notes to the office or hand out homework assignments back to the class. Students with ADHD love doing this kind of stuff, and they excel at it. Many ADHD students have a strong desire to please. And even the studies have found that oppositional children with ADHD generally want to do well, and they want to gain recognition from their parents and teachers. But the ADHD symptoms can make these goals sometimes feel almost impossible for them. So it's important to put ADHD children in position to succeed, experience positive reinforcements, And these things will help to decrease the likelihood that the child learns to dislike school or think of himself as a poor student. Students with ADHD are quick thinkers. They tend to see big picture ideas here. They are able to take in information very quickly, multitask when they're interested in the topic, of course, and adapt. And these students, again, can be very helpful in like an emergency type of situation. And probably the last thing I want to focus on, another big strength of students with ADHD is they have an ability to hyperfocus. And what that means is if they find a task or something that they really get behind, they can spend large quantity, hours focused on this one task. And their attention will not drift. They can be just incredibly hyper-focused in just attention to detail on these small, minute things here, which again, as a teacher, trying to stimulate and engage the student in a way that they want to learn is going to be critical to the success of an ADHD student. Tips for working with ADHD students, and there are many of them out there. Probably one of the most, there's many tips here that need to be employed, and not one of them is really necessarily more important than the others, but each student is kind of unique in what their needs, strengths, and weaknesses are. But keeping a routine and a schedule. The same routine every day, from what time they wake up, what time they go to bed, what time homework is, what time outdoor play is, what time indoor activities are, and posting that schedule if at all possible in the house. Many teachers will have somewhere right in the room a more or less minute by minute breakdown of where the students are throughout the day, even if they're in the same classroom. Math will go from 8 to 8:50. From 8:50 to 9:30 will be reading time. From 9:30 to 10 o'clock will be writing workshop. From 10 to 11 they'll be at art. So having that schedule and predictability and routine is very important for a student with ADHD, so they know what's coming. They're able to prepare for it. Organization. Organizing. Have a place for everything. Clothing, backpacks, toys, pencils, calculators, glasses. Anything the student may need, both at home and at the school, should be organized, and the student should know where this is at all times. Using homework, notebook organizers. And again, the teacher or parent may need to help with recording information in these things here if the student is unable or unwilling to write this stuff here. But having that information recorded and written down allows the student to come back to it, so they know what they need to do. They know what the expectations and what needs to be accomplished are. As a teacher or parent, when working with an ADHD student, you need to be clear and consistent. Fair. Students with ADHD have a strong understanding of fairness. And again, as a teacher and parent, being very clear and consistent and following through is very important to a student with ADHD. Students with ADHD need to be praised, rewards, and many times a student with ADHD, they obviously get their fair share of criticism. Again, corrective action needs to be taken from time to time, and that's just part of life. But at the same time, we need to focus on the positives. Celebrate their successes. Be a cheerleader for their success there. Offering choices in the classroom is a big thing here. Many times, a lot of work or just a formative assessment can be accomplished in a variety of ways. For a writing activity, for example, I mean, the students could have 5 different choices of how they wish to do it. For example, they could take their vocabulary words and they could write them on flashcards if they'd like. They could write sentences that use these words. They could air write words out. They could use technology, their personal computer, to do the assignment there. But being able to give them options and choices of how they wish to demonstrate their mastery of skills is very important to a student with ADHD. Visual reminders in the classroom. And a lot of these things here, ADHD students tend to respond well to visual clues and examples. Putting these things on brightly colored poster paper around the room is good too. That gives it a little bit of color and life there. But being able to visually give assignments and reminders instead of just oral or written instructions can help a student with ADHD. Increasing class participation. And again, it's understood that students with ADHD, they are talkative, they want to move. The teacher needs to make sure that they can be included in these conversations as appropriate to give them that outlet of their energy. They want to talk, they want to get involved in the discussion there. So the teacher needs to make sure that they are enabled to do it. Multisensory learning, hands-on learning, where students with ADHD, again, with all that movement there, they want to use their hands. So if there's opportunities to act out a play or a scenario instead of writing it, or recording an assignment where they can use their voice instead of written, taking apart a model, building a model. All these things here are good outlets that can be used for a student with ADHD to supplement or even replace certain writing assignments that are not real popular with ADHD students. Making sure the rules are posted. Students with ADHD need to know what the rules and expectations are. This should be very clear. They should also be very clear on what the consequences will be. None of this should be a mystery here. And again, having these rules posted so they are visible to all is very important to a student with ADHD to ensure that they are able to see these rules. And again, it's just all clear, concise, consistent, and fair. Accommodations can be made for students with ADHD. Giving extended time for tests, shortening down assignments, segmenting assignments, like long-term projects with separate due dates and grades there. These things will kind of compartmentalize the assignment to a much smaller form here. Being able to reduce distractions in the room, whatever that may be here. There's a wide variety of distractions come up, and some may not be able to be fully replaced or eliminated there, but if there's an opportunity to reduce potential distractions, will help the student with ADHD focus. Positive reinforcement, and this one again, I can't emphasize it enough, that finding opportunities and ways to congratulate the student, encourage the student, acknowledge their efforts in a positive manner will have long-standing effects for a student with ADHD. This can even be extended by using positive peer models, where you can encourage the student to sit near positive students to ease the distractions from other students with challenging or diverting behavior. And again, I would say probably last thing on this thing here, focusing on the positives, student-teacher relationship. If the student can respect and get to know the teacher, the students with ADHD do not want to let people down that they respect. It's ingrained in their nature, and the teacher, again, should find a way, hopefully, to build that student-teacher relationship. I guess one more thing I want to say is a lot of times for reprimanding a student with ADHD, ask questions. If the student's misbehaving, instead of pointing out the error of their ways, pose it as a question and say, is that a good choice or a bad choice that you're making right now? And the student will get the message that his behavior is appropriate. But this also challenges it back to the student to think about their actions when it is posed as a question instead of as a statement of what they're doing wrong. So finally here, I want to just incorporate one point from Judy Willis, an author who wrote about students that have various learning disabilities here, and she states that physical movement applies to the kinesthetic style of many ADHD students and has the added benefit of linking the material to be learned with sensory input, thereby increasing access to the brain's memory banks. And I am a big believer too, where if the student doesn't have an outlet for their movement, it's going to be so difficult for any of these other aspects to come into play here. The movement and the fidgetiness is going to be a problem. So in my opinion, this is probably the most important thing to address first here. So how do we deal with that in the classroom here? Well, many classrooms, especially in the elementary and middle school level, have these physio balls, which are basically big balls that the students can sit on. They can kind of swing back and forth here. Some of these stools, again, are balance discs where the bottom is kind of rounded, and again, the disc will the student can kind of rock back and forth here. There's ergonomic stools, and I've seen, again, that helps a lot of ADHD students, or they make these resistance bands, which are basically just strips of rubber that go under the desk, and the student can use their feet and kind of swing and kick at them there. They're not loud. Again, it can be mildly distracting for other students, but I've seen the other students tend to just block it out once the novelty of some of these things gets used. Establishing workstations around the classroom, which a student, like say for a math assignment there, if they're doing comparative fractions, different tables in the room could have fractions set up in maybe 4 different stations, and the students would need to walk to different points of the classroom to find the equivalent fraction off the table there. I've seen the use of fidget spinners, which are real good too. Having the student be allowed to pass out homework assignments, take notes to the office, sometimes having them just do a quick activity, like you can play a game of Simon Says, which will help them use some of their energy. Sometimes when you have them respond, you can have them respond in a different way, like they could stand on one foot, or they can move their arms around. You can check with the student and check their comprehension by playing thumbs up, thumbs down. If the student is understanding or liking something, they can give a thumbs up, and if they don't, they can give a thumbs down here. But the bottom line is, the need to move is strong in the ADHD student. So we just don't want them sitting around. Finding any modification that can be done to the classroom there will help these students. And on my last slide here, I have my references that I used to create this presentation today. I hope the presentation was enjoyable for you, and I thank you for watching.